Thank you. Good morning. Just on? It's good. All right. So this is my first time in Virginia. So I've been impressed by the 12 hours that I've been here. So I see trees. I'm from Arizona, so that's a big deal for me. So it really is a privilege to speak with you and to be with you on this topic. So psychodrama. Show me with your hands how experienced, exposed you are to psychodrama. And the way we'll do that, if you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, then your hand would be on the floor. If you feel like you're an expert at psychodrama, your hand is way up here and you can present instead of me. So show me where you're at as far as knowledge, experience, exposure. So I think you're the winner over there with like 60%. So thank you for that. I just like to know who I'm kind of visiting with. So as some of you know, psychodrama is an action-oriented type of therapy, and it requires warm-ups. So we're going to do a warm-up today. I'd invite you to stand up. And we're going to do a non-threatening, low-anxiety warm-up. I have to say that. So just pick a partner out. Does everybody have a partner? If you don't have a partner, I don't want to trigger any lost child issues. So first of all, I have to demonstrate what I'm doing. Thanks for volunteering. Come on up. What you'll do is just put your hands up like this. This is a non-verbal exercise. Do you want to talk about that? Good. So basically, you just kind of follow what I'm doing without touching. Good. So go on back to your partner and talk among yourselves and decide who's going to be A and who's going to be B. You pick a letter first. Decide who's going to be A or B. Don't start yet. Don't start yet. Just choose a letter. So when I do this with families, this is when sometimes fights break out about choosing letters. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's like a big conflict. No, I want to be A. So, all right, so put your hands up. Without touching or talking, follow B. Go. Okay, stop and shake it out. Some of you took that literally and just became an exercise thing. All right, put your hands up again. And this time, A leads. Go. Okay, good. Shake it out. Shake it out. Okay, put your hands up one more time. And this time, nobody leads. Go. Stop, shake it out, and sit down. All right, so what was your experience doing that? Do some people want to kind of share a little bit? What was your experience? Yes, ma'am.
The most confusing part was nobody, because nobody leaves. Probably nothing should happen.
Right.
But then you want things to happen because you become uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. Anybody relate to that? Yes, ma'am, back there.
When it was, everybody do your own thing, was that to show who was following and who was leading, or no? 'Cause I don't know anything about this.
So it's interesting, when I asked what your experience was, clinicians ask questions. we'll get there, we'll get there. Yes, sir.
Well, first thing was, it was just really fun. And what it reminded me of was the Marx Brothers. Now, this classic from, I forget which, but they were all the same to me from the early 30s, where Groucho and Harpo are doing this thing, like they're pretending that there's a mirror. They piece each other completely. And Lucy on I Love Lucy did that thing with Harpo, did the same thing.
I remember that. I remember that.
And so to me, there was this great comic element. I decided what we were robots.
Yeah.
That's where I started doing sound effects, and which was not part of the exercise, but it just felt like the right thing to do.
Sure.
It was just a giggle. The third thing, when nobody was in, it reminded. I thought it's just like being married. It's sort of like what you have to work out is sometimes one person needs spontaneity, the other person needs sometimes something just spontaneously happens. So what happens, we just share it. He was like, no problem.
Excellent. A lot of material there. Anybody else want to share experiences?
It was interesting for me because when I was leading, I could feel my codependence coming up. I was a lot more anxious because I wanted to make sure he was following me. And so I'd find myself slowing down or, making sure he was right there with me. And then when he led, I was much more relaxed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
One thing I noticed, when I didn't want to lead, so I picked B, which you tricked us. So then when I did lead, I had absolutely no eye contact. And I actually pointed that out. I was like, I didn't even make any eye contact. I was like looking over here while I was doing this.
Yes.
So I thought
More
that was
people? Ma'am?
I know we were not supposed to pick up energy from each other, but I did. I was picking up energy from her hands, and I noticed that the inside of my hands began to start warming up, even though we were not touching.
So I never said we weren't supposed to pick up energy.
Well, no, you didn't say that, but I mean, that wasn't a part of what I thought the exercise was.
Oh. Well, you'll be surprised.
Okay.
And I'll tell more about that in a minute.
I found it easier to lead than follow, and then I found it a bit of a relief to be able to do my own thing and nobody leads.
Yeah, yeah. Do you believe that with the part where nobody leads, that there are people out there that are attracted to chaos?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We were attracted to order. We just stood there.
I think that's called addictions. I don't know. But some people really, that's the best part. They love the nobody leading part. So this is where we're going to talk about the why. We did that. So some people just love to lead, and they feel very uncomfortable following. Some people just love to follow and feel very uncomfortable in leading. Some people will lead at home, but follow at work. You ever hear the family therapist phrase, who's the sheriff in the family? I think some guy from South America, family therapist, said that years ago, that somebody seems to take charge. So why did I do this? What's that's got to do with psychodrama? Anybody want to guess? Now it's time for questions. So, to warm up, it's about to have fun. It's about how to decrease anxiety. It's about how to get into our bodies. Psychodrama is a body action-oriented technique. It's a way to break the ice, and it also demonstrates the very basic elementary psychodrama technique of mirroring, okay, which is a really basic psychodrama technique. So to mirror somebody, all you do is you have somebody there, and you just copy what they're doing. And so somebody may be having a lot of anxiety and is twitching around, and they just aren't aware of that. So you have somebody in a non-shaming way mirror them, and they get a reflection or a picture of what they're doing. Sometimes we can embellish that and exaggerate that to really demonstrate, boy, this is what I'm feeling from you going on. So it's a basic psychodrama technique of mirroring. So do me a favor and put your hands really close together without touching. What do you feel? What do you experience? Energy. There's that energy, see? What else do you experience? Tingling. Warmth, thank you. Put your hands down because you look like a prayer group right now. So we as human beings, I believe, are made up of various things, but we're made up of energy. And when we're in relationships with somebody, we're feeling each other's energy. You ever gone into a room and immediately, without knowing somebody, you thought, I don't want to go near that person. The energy, the aura that that person's putting off, or just the opposite. You go in a room and said, I really want to get close to that person. Maybe the energy that's going on. So in relationships, there's energy being put on. And psychodrama is a technique where we pick up on energy, and in fact, we follow the energy. So that's what, and what I do with clients and patients, I will also say, if this is an urge, who do you follow without question if you have an addiction and you're entrenched with an addiction? So who do you follow without question if you have an addiction? The supplier. Good. So we're addicts right now. We're entrenched in the disease. Yeah. So if your mind is saying, I got to do drugs, and this is an urge, you immediately do drugs or find drugs. If you have an eating disorder and it says, I want to not eat, you immediately restrict. Okay? So this is the urge and this is the behavior. And I tell clients and patients, this is what recovery looks like. You have an urge, you have a behavior. In the middle, there's a choice. And to me, that's the definition of recovery, is you can choose and you can choose again.
Now, I do have a question.
Yes.
Because in the field of psychology, we used to just teach 5 senses, and now we do teach 6, and that has to do with the gut feeling, and we talk a little bit about auras, and you talked about energy.
Yes.
Is this kind of, we need to teach our clients to pick up on positive or negative or dangerous or?
I think we promote awareness of that.
Okay.
Awareness of what our body is saying, and that goes with somatic experiencing work that is very popular now, and it's about what is your body saying to you, and listen to it, because often our bodies are telling us one thing and we're thinking another thing, and if you have an eating disorder, the body is screaming at you, by the way. So we'll get into that. So anyway, that's an introduction to what I'm doing. Got to find my clicker here. Am I yelling? Does it seem like I'm yelling? Maybe it's projected, repressed anger. I'm not really sure. All right. So this is a quote that I like. It says, as you can read, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. So that's either from Confucius or a fortune cookie. I'm not really sure where I got that. But it's talking about really what psychodrama is. So people that study how people learn and remember, if I stand up here and talk nonstop for an hour and a half, how much do you think you'll remember on a good day? Yeah, some researchers say 17% on a good day, much less if you're impaired or coming off drugs and alcohol or some of the disease. So if I use a visual and use a PowerPoint, the learning retention goes up a little bit. Guess what? If you do something and step into it, like this little mirroring thing, you'll remember it and understand it. And you have a little movie in your head right now of what a mirroring technique is, and you'll know it. So that's, to me, one of the advantages of psychodrama action-oriented techniques. So feel free to stop and ask questions, give comments. This is what the overview is. I come from an eating disorder world, but before that I was into addictions work and general mental health work. So I adapt this talk for my audience. I will talk a little bit about eating disorders, but I also talk about addictions. I believe that the approach with psychodrama is very collaborative and comparative with whatever. And there's a lot of discussion right now is food and addiction. That's a big controversy in the eating disorder world. So anyway, what I'm going to talk about briefly today is how psychodrama and experiential techniques can be worked with eating disorders and addictions. I understand my crowd. And the timing, what we can expect when working with people who are physically and cognitively compromised. Do we do psychodrama with people that aren't, the lights aren't on? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about with nutrition, food is their medicine. With addictions, detox is their medicine. Okay, you're not going to work real effectively with psychodrama with somebody that's drunk or coming off of a heroin use. We'll talk a little bit about psychodrama, history, etc. I'll do some non-threatening demonstrations. People get all anxious when I say that word. And we'll talk about training options. Okay? All right, so this is a fitting quote, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I also believe that one needs to feel in order to heal. That's one of the advantages of psychodrama and experiential techniques is we take the long elevator ride from our head to our heart, and sometimes action-oriented techniques like this, we can drop a lot of defenses that people with addictions and other diseases carry around. So people often with eating disorders and other addictions are really good with intellectualization, using lots of words, baffle people with BS, do that circular thinking, a lot of other defenses like anger, hostility, all forms of denial. My favorite one is rationalization. You know, I really think it's rational lies if you break the word out as a defense. And psychodrama is one way. If people are willing, psychodrama is a therapy of invitation. It's not like you will do psychodrama. It's like we're inviting you to do a psychodrama. That's when it's most effective, in my opinion. Yes, ma'am.
Do you use that for trauma, treatment for trauma?
Absolutely. For people that are open to that, psychodrama is an effective way to do trauma interventions because they actually see the trauma. And we'll talk more about that. And because it's my belief with good treatment is that iceberg thing above the water are the symptoms of addictions, eating disorders, depression, anxiety. Under the water, the bigger part is the core issues, which is our woundedness. It's the pain. And it's sometimes we need to visually see that. And psychodrama is cool about that. So, anyway. Why psychodrama? It's an alternative form of treatment with eating disorders and addictions, which provides a cathartic opportunity for healing. Provides an opportunity for healing. Does anybody know what an AFGO is? AFGO? You ever heard that? Good.
And I will risk not having to do the G version. It stands for another fucking growth opportunity.
I was going to say freaking. So psychodrama is an AFGO. It's another freaking growth opportunity. So I like that. You're the first one ever that knew what it was. It gets people out of their heads and into our hearts, and it's literally seeing our pain or stuck points, resistance, family of origin, unfinished business, shame, guilt, eating disorders, addictions, up close and personal. You see it. And for some people, that externalization, that visual technique is what they need because they're into their heads. Does that make sense so far? We'll see that in a minute. Readiness for psychodrama needs to be assessed. If you have an eating disorder, food is your medicine. You're not going to do real effective with psychodrama as somebody that's nutritionally compromised. If you're an adult and you weigh 78 pounds, we tend not to do it. The lights aren't on. They're very malnourished. They're not firing. For people that are in active detox, we tend not to do that. For people that are overtly psychotic, we tend not to do that. But in a minute, I'll tell you about somebody that did do that. For people that actively disassociate, we tend not to do that. We can do some with people that mildly disassociate and bring them back, but there's a real danger of blatant regression. And I've seen that happen where people go to the childlike state and they don't come back. So there is some screening, responsible screening involved, and some experience when you're doing it. It's like any therapeutic tool, responsibility is key, obviously. So I think we did that. So the origins of psychodrama, some of you may know this. So who's the father of psychodrama? Yeah, Dr. J.L. Marino, who came from Europe to the United States in the early 20th century. So the story goes, and I've been told, and I think this has some validity, that Dr. Marino was placed out in one of his early jobs in California at a state mental hospital. And he was assigned to work and do some group therapy with this eclectic group that had schizophrenics and prostitutes in it. So whatever reason back then, they committed some prostitutes. I don't know if it's because of some social problems or bias or whatever, but he was asked to do a group therapy intervention with schizophrenics and prostitutes. Traditional talk therapy did not work very well with that group. So the story goes that he left one day from his job, and he was very dejected, kind of walking along like this, going home, and he heard this noise, and he turned, and he looked, and it was kids playing at recess at school. And he just kind of became enamored with that and watched them for a while, and he realized these kids were role-playing. They were naturalistically saying, I'm the teacher, I'm mommy, I'm daddy, I'm my brother, I'm my cousin. And they were playing out kind of skits. And at first it appeared to be conflictual. They played a little bit, they skipped back to class. And they did better. So a little light bulb went on for Dr. Marino, particularly because he also was a fan of the Greek tragedies, the plays. And he kind of put this together. Can we act out our feelings like these kids just did? And so he developed psychodrama. And his first group room was literally a stage where people would come up on a stage. And in his books and his writing and his talks, he literally refers to the group area as the stage and the therapist as the director. Okay? So he became inspired by that. About that same period of time, Dr. Fritz Perls, who's famous for development of Gestalt therapy, was also developing, he wouldn't call it psychodrama. He developed some other techniques that are psychodramatic. And so this is an entertaining clue. What was one of his techniques? Empty chair. Thank you. And basically, and some of you have seen Fritz act like he's my friend. Fritz, in some of the films that some of them saw in graduate school or read some of his readings, he's a very charismatic, almost gregarious person. Somebody would be saying, you know, I never really told my mother goodbye. She died. I never had that closure. That really bothers me. And Dr. Perls would say, guess what? She's right here. Have a conversation. And in that moment, the dynamics of that session changed. And that acting as if, you would think intellectually, well, what does that do? It does affect people. People really believe that that person's energy is in that chair, and the person would have a conversation and say goodbye to their mother and have this cathartic, healing, closure-filled moment. And they also use the technique of switch roles. And he said, now you be your mom and talk to yourself. And in that moment, she would talk as if her mother, and often is very like, it's okay, I knew you were there for me, I knew you loved me, I know that this is what you wanted to say. And it'd be very emotional, cathartic, and healing for that person. So he also believed in something, sometimes he purposely created impasses. He created frustration. And he would leave somebody in that. Because he also saw that as an AFCO, a learning moment, and he would not try to artificially kind of like complete the session and make them happy and tie it up with a bow and say, yay. If they were stuck, he would say, okay, we'll see you next week, and let them be stuck. Now, sometimes in inpatient settings, I feel some responsibility to close it up. You don't want to open a wound and put a Band-Aid on it and say, see you next week. So there is some responsibility there. But he believed that impasses are learning opportunities. So I really like that about him. Virginia Satir is familiar with Virginia? In Virginia. So Virginia Satir was a famous social worker who really introduced family sculpts. And as some of you know, have read some of her books and seen her on tapes, etc., is she really said to kids, their parents are giants. And so she would visualize that technique by having people role play themselves as kids looking at their giants of parental roles. And she's the one that introduced, along with some others, some of the basic survivor roles that kids take in dysfunctional families. And some of you know some of those roles, which are often talked about for kids that live in alcoholic situations and become ACOAs, adult children of alcoholics, and they become mascots. They become lost children. They become the scapegoat. They become the rebel. They become the mediator. And she really talked about the dysfunctional roles that kids take on to survive that chaos. And so they played out those roles and resolved some things. Sharon Westsider Cruz, who knows Sharon? Thank you. So Sharon Westsider Cruz was mentored by Virginia. And Sharon Westsider Cruz was also one of the pioneers in the ACOA movements. She was inspired by the family sculpt and went on to establish, along with some others, something called experiential therapy, which is a little more an extension of psychodrama. One is not better than the other, it's just a little bit different, but it's an action-oriented technique. In the 1970s, Sharon founded an organization called On-Site Workshops, which was in the Black Hills of South Dakota and is now in Tennessee. And that's where I learned this stuff. I went to On-Site myself, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But it's still a personal workshop that uses experiential and psychodrama to action-oriented techniques. Dr. Tion Dayton, who knows Dr. Dayton? So Dr. Dayton's my hero. She's the queen of psychodrama. And she's written several books and given several seminars and is still very active in the field on psychodrama and techniques. If you want to learn more about it, you can read her famous book, The Living Stage, and also another book called The Drama Within, which actually gives very specific techniques of psychodrama. But she's written many, many, many books, and so she's a delight to be around. In my experience, very briefly, and I'm watching the time, is that I was tricked into using psychodrama. So in 1995, I was a therapist, pretty much a cognitive behavioral therapist, and a coworker says, let's go to this on-site workshop place. It's going to be good professional education for you. You can really learn some cool stuff. And I said, okay. So I went there, and it was the experiential psychodrama model, which was foreign to me. And they tricked me, and they said, guess what? You got to do your own work first. So I did that, and I had an amazing, amazing transformational experience. I was introduced to my inner child. I'm a recovering alcoholic with 29 years of sobriety, and back then in 95, I had some good years of sobriety, but they introduced something to me called codependency and helped me realize that was the root of a lot of my stuff. So we did psychodrama's experiential work around my inner child, codependency, some unfinished business that had been bothering me since I was 17 years old, and I felt amazing healing, and it changed my life. It changed the way I saw myself, interact with other people, and I still work for On-Site. I go there 3 times a year. I'm one of their group leaders, and I started using this type of work in my profession. So it was really transformative to me. So that's my personal experience. Guess what? It's really advocated before you work with people that you do your own work first. Just saying. Might be a good idea. All right. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about sculpting, which is a good introductory skill. We're going to do a little demonstration about that. So Virginia Satir did a family sculpt. A family sculpt is a frozen moment in time. And so we're just going to demonstrate that, do a non-threatening demonstration. So let's do a family of origin kind of thing. So, guys, hypothetically, what shall we do? Alcoholic family. Okay. So, let's say somebody is looking at their life as an adult at their childhood where they were raised by alcoholic parents. So let's just look at a picture of that if you're willing. How's everybody's anxiety right now while I'm talking? Because this is when I invite volunteers. So, is there anybody in here that wants to be an angry alcoholic father? So do you want to be? Well, actually, the cool thing about psychodrama is it's non-sexist. You can be either or. Yeah, you can be whatever. Come on up. What is your first name? Laura. Let's give Laura a hand for volunteering. Our first volunteer. Yeah. So we're just going to set up a sculpt just to kind of get an idea of this technique. So if you're willing, stand up on a chair. Don't fall down because I don't want to get sued. Who wants to be this angry, raging alcoholic? And if standing is uncomfortable for you, let me know. Yeah. Take care of yourself, which is another key to psychodrama. Ask for what you need. Who wants to be his subservient wife? Anybody willing to do that? Thanks. Usually I find if I wait a few minutes, people get uncomfortable and volunteer. No, you're down. You're sitting down. You're sitting down. Yeah, you're subservient. So I would suggest you do like this. And I would suggest you're pointing. Okay? And you also have some alcohol in your hands. Can you feel how the energy is kind of changing just by this sculpt a little bit? And we'll just do a brief demonstration of some basic roles real quickly. So, who wants to be the mediator, the rescuer? Anybody want to volunteer and do that? Come on up. Thanks for rescuing me. So you're basically, as a little child, saying, let's stop this, let's all get along. Okay? And sometimes this kid can be 5 years old and step in the middle of an alcoholic rage and say, come on, guys, let's get along. Okay? Who wants to be the rebel? It's an easy role. Oh, excellent. So come on up. You're standing right there. The rebel is maybe the most intelligent role. Basically, he's saying, you guys are crazy, I'm out of here. And you guys are nuts. And they're a little angry, too, on the way out, but they usually come back. So you're just kind of doing like that. Feel that energy?
Oh, he does.
Okay. So the distractor, the comedian, you may want to be that. Who's a funny person in here? So I'm feeling some energy from you that you're a jokester. You're willing to volunteer? So basically, yeah, this is easy. Basically, you're just right here and you're doing anything to kind of distract. Okay? Yeah, that's good. The laughter's good. There you go. Just freeze in that position. And we have the mascot or the super achiever. Does anybody want to be that? All you got to do is stand. You willing to help me out? All right. So this is Miss Perfect. This is the lady that, she's even walking. This is the lady that gets all A's, is president of Stuco, is going to go to Harvard, and reminds them. So you're like this, Superwoman. And this is her way to distract them and say, if I'm perfect, that'll settle you down, and you'll stop this. Okay? And what are we forgetting?
The lost child.
Yeah, who wants to be a lost child?
What do they have to do?
She got it. Last child is in a room over here, hiding, playing with dolls on your computer, on the phone, doing anything else, looking out the window. She is surviving by hiding. Okay? And so these are the primary roles, guys. So this is a typical dysfunctional alcoholic family. It could be drugs, it could be codependency, it could be eating disorder, it could just be chaos. It could be mental health issues, whatever. So this is a frozen sculpt in time, which Virginia Satir. So what we can do, if the patient or the client usually is outside and watching this, we can say, okay, here's a great picture for you. You can kind of take a mental picture, carry it back, talk about it more in therapy, whatever you want to do. Or we can heat it up a little bit. How could you heat this up? What would voices? Is that what you say? Verbal. So the cool thing about psychodrama is literally we have like 30 choices right now, responsibly. Okay? So I could do one simple thing and have you say something like, you better get out of my face or I'll hurt you.
You are trying to hurt me, but you're the one who's going to hurt.
And the distractor? Perfect. And you're just going to say, let's just all get along, guys. And you're going to say, you're nuts, I'm out of here.
You're nuts, I'm out of here.
Hey, I just got an A on my physics.
Good, we'll talk about it later.
Hey, I got an A.
You're all assholes.
Don't distract me. I've had it with you.
Yeah, exactly. And she doesn't say a thing. We almost forgot she was here, right? All right. So this is just a brief example. Do you feel the energy change in the room? We could do a lot of things with this. We could switch roles. We could have the protagonist, which is the star, from the outside come in and start talking to some of these roles and speaking her truth. Like, Dad, when you did this, this is what I felt. And do some anger discharge work. Anybody know what that is? Anybody heard of a pataka bat? One of those foam cushion bats? Yeah, that thing. So somebody might say, this is really making me angry. And as a responsible psychodrama therapist, I would say, where in your body do you feel anger right now? I don't suggest that they're angry. They tell me they're angry. Sometimes they tell me without saying anything, non-verbally. So one of the biggest clues with psychodrama is I follow their eyes. And if they're looking mainly at their mom, or at their dad, who's raging, I don't say to them, gosh, you need to be talking to your mom. No, their energy's right here. And I can say, my sense is you're really angry right now. You damn right I'm angry. What do you want to do with that anger? And we may suggest some bat work. That's one form of anger. But if the anger's in their feet, we may have them kick at a foam cushion responsibly. But my main responsibility first is to provide safety, create safety. Nobody physically or emotionally is going to get hurt. Okay? So it's usually removed from the situation. Sometimes we can pull, push. There's lots of varieties of anger discharge work. It's just not screaming and hitting the bat. You can do a lot of different things. Sometimes somebody just needs to say, I'm really, really angry. And that's their anger work because they repressed it for years. So, any other questions or comments about this little dynamic here?
What if you don't have this many players? Or you're only working with
Excellent.
one client or a few clients?
Do you have chairs?
Okay,
One of the most effective psychodrama work I ever did one time was with somebody one-on-one, individually. Nobody else was in the room. I used paper clips. I used a stapler. I used a trash can, ironically to represent bulimia, because they threw up in a trash can. I used empty chairs, and it was just me and them. Everything's a prop. That light up there can represent a higher power. Everything's a prop. I think the dynamics are much better if you have a group, but you always have something you can use. So you're A1 because you got all A's. Let's give him a hand. So what's very important is to de-roll. De-roll is to say who you are and who you're not, because we don't want people to carry toxic roles around all day, do we? So you would say your first name and say, I'm not the distractor. Say your first name.
Okay, my name is Rudy.
And I'm not
And I'm not
the distractor.
a distractor.
Okay. And you would say your first name and I'm not? What role did you play? Right, right. You would say, and you would say, don't want to forget you over there. You would say, thank you. Who else played a role? You would say,
I'm Cindy and I'm not a codependent woman.
you would say,
I'm Fred, I'm not a rebel.
yeah. And that's really, it's really important because some people play this angry person and it sticks to them for a while. They need to shake it off, literally. So, and then what follows a psychodrama is feedback. Feedback as psychodrama is not advice, but what did you see, feel, hear, and more importantly, how did you relate to it? We talk about in psychodrama work, private work and public work. So if this was about somebody's life, somebody that was looking at it in front of others, that's their public work. If somebody related to this, either in the audience or playing a role, that's private work. Somebody may say, that reminded me of my dad. And they talk about that. That's their own work. Everybody wins. Does that make sense? Okay. Eric, how are we doing on time? So, do you offer like 10 minutes of a break? All right. So 10 minutes, please come back. See you in 10 minutes. All right, I wanted to, sounds like there's an echo. Does anybody have anything they wanted to share about that last experience, anything that came up for them personally? Because that's an important part. Anything it reminded them of?
It was a lot of energy to keep up in the position, so it made me think of how that relates to the alcoholic family.
Right, right. Yeah, Deborah.
It was fascinating and really surprising how I truly forgot about the lost child until you mentioned her. Reminding me of things in my own family.
Yeah. So that's an essential part of this work is what did you relate to? What did it bring up for you? And it's just like, oh, I hadn't thought about that for years. And it brings up stuff. And usually if there's a lot of energy that it brings up, it's probably unfinished business. It's probably stuff you need to kind of continue to look at or whatever. So what do you think the lost child is susceptible to as they become an adult? What kind of disorder? What happens to them if there's no intervention? What happens to the lost child?
Well, the eating disorders, they very close to that. Sure, Webster talked about that a long
Yes.
time ago.
Yeah.
But the other thing is invisibility.
Invisibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the metaphor with eating disorders is invisibility. Anorexics often will admit, I'm not eating because I want to be not seen. I want to be invisible. And it's a huge metaphor. So lost children are susceptible to eating disorders, depression, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse, and they often end up with somebody like their father in relationships, a raging father.
I heard at one time that the lost child is actually one that gets the sickest in the family
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
because they don't have any outlet.
There's no validation. Yeah. So what, the perfect mascot, the superachiever, what disease is she susceptible to? Narcissism. Okay. OCD. Yeah.
Eating disorders too.
Thank you. So the middle name of eating disorders is perfection. They're so rigid, has to be just this way, and I have to look a certain way. So they're very susceptible to eating disorders. The distractor, what are they susceptible to? What do you think?
That's what switched for me. I switched roles several times during my
Yeah.
family work, and I started out as the distractor, and then I became trying to become the perfect child.
Thank you.
Then I became the rebel. Then I'm out of here.
And a lot of people play hopscotch with roles. They'll try one for a while, it doesn't work, they'll try something else. And sometimes when they grow up, that's how they do relationships. They'll try to be the rescuer, that doesn't work, then they'll try to do the rebel, that doesn't work. So
What about
substance abuse, very susceptible. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, when you're talking about changing roles, I thought that's a lot healthier than rigidity. And so, like, I'm beginning to think, what is normal? I mean, I thought we all change roles to adapt to the situation.
Yes.
And, I focus now because I teach healthy people psychology. And sometimes I get caught up that everybody is neurotic and everything like that. And, to switch roles, I thought is a positive coping mechanism, I guess, unless you take it to the extreme.
Well
When
said.
you're
Well said. So this is about survival. And kids, we needed to take on roles to survive this craziness. And this is how sometimes children become resilient and survive the moment. Now when they bring that into later adult relationships and continue to play that out, they're just recreating the insanity, the disease, I would suggest. You kind of grimaced on that, like you didn't like
yeah,
that?
because it's like, I come, I am a licensed therapist,
Yeah.
but I get into these things and it's like, who is normal? This is
Nobody's normal.
Well, I teach my
Normal is a
students,
saying
if
on the
you're
dryer.
surviving, you probably don't need that much help, but I think we have to focus more on what is working and this is good, even though it's not perfect.
Depends what it's masking and what it's medicating, I would suggest.
Everybody's medicating something.
I think what she's referring to is, and I know what you're talking about, is that when you're in school, they say that in a normal family,
Yeah.
people will change roles as necessary. For example, if child A gets an A, yay, good job. Child B gets a goal at the game, yay, good job. That's a healthy family. As opposed to what he's saying is, out of survival, the child is trying to distract from the chaos in the family and say, look at me, I got an A or a goal or whatever. So,
But that is survival. I know, when does it get to the extreme? It's just like,
Right, and I agree with you. Everybody's medicating something. It's to the point, does it become dysfunctional?
Right.
And are we hiding and covering up our authentic
because
selves?
of the label.
right.
Yeah. So,
And rigidity is,
That's
I know
the
what you're
worst.
talking about is like, even if, I've seen that in
Yeah.
family therapy, even if the bad kid does something good, the parents are like, oh, whatever, it's manipulative, or
Right,
it's this,
right,
and
you're
it's
still the
like,
bad
really?
kid.
it's
You can't-
labeling. So
Yeah.
one more comment, then I'm going to go on.
I just think it's amazing how we find these roles, whether we're in a normal family or a dysfunctional family. We find as children, we will find a role that works for us. And if it's praising you when you're getting a good grade or scoring or whatever, but still none of us are going to be the same. You understand what I'm saying? We're going to find a role where we fit in this family.
Well said. Out of survival.
Out of survival.
So, okay, good discussion. I appreciate that. So I'm going to go on with your permission. These are some basic tools of psychodrama. We've talked about the empty chair. You could do psychodrama as long as you have a chair. Okay? The roles, we already demonstrated some roles that people use. Inner child, I just briefly mentioned that. Sometimes people have a hard time saying, what is this inner child stuff? And so I just say, think about yourself as a little boy or a little girl. What were you like growing up? And sometimes what I have them do is draw a picture of yourself as a little boy or a little girl with your non-dominant hand, because it's more childlike. And then they say, this was me. And they just, their face light up, or they get very sad about, this is who I was. And sometimes they even tape it on their chest for a while. And literally they become aware that they're carrying around this inner child inside of them that they need to nourish, nurture, parent, take care of, allow that child to come out and play and be spontaneous, whatever. And sometimes we use that to teach adults how to parent ourselves. It's more childlike. Yeah, it's like more crude, so you don't have to get real sophisticated. Particularly, yeah, good. I'm glad you're frustrated. When people are frustrated, boy, what an opportunity to do work. So it's more childlike, especially if you're perfectionistic and want to make it just right. It just frustrates the heck out of people. So that's why I do the non-dominant hand. So inner child is something, anger discharge, we already talked a little bit about that. Props, there are some people that use lots and lots of props. I use some props now. Some examples of props are like a baby doll, scars of different colors, red to represent anger, white to represent a higher power. Sometimes I use some other props like an actual empty alcohol bottle. Try that in an addiction treatment center. Give somebody a vodka bottle that's empty. You can work on that all day. I trigger people on purpose in an inpatient center. Okay? It's a little bit funky if you do that and you have 50 minutes and say, see you in 2 weeks. Okay? Sometimes what we do at Rosewood is give people a binge basket. If they're a binge purger, which means they eat a lot, then they purge. And they actually get a high off the purge. That's similar to a high people get off of drugs. So to work with that in an inpatient center, we have them carry around a binge basket, which has food, potato chips, popcorn, and an empty alcohol bottle, if they're also alcoholic. And they carry that around all day. And we find out if they eat it or offer it to somebody or have all this. And they often have an emotional meltdown, and then we do real therapy. Okay? So you can use various props. I go to garage sales and pick up like stuffed animals, things like that. I have one that's a shield. I have a fireman's hat to represent codependency because they're rescuing people. So you can get props anywhere. I often go to the dollar store, and they cost about $1. Heating up is what I said. Do you want to? And I asked the patient, the client, the protagonist, the star. I always check in with them. They're in charge. And that helps them because they know that nothing's going to happen that they're not in control of. I say, do you want to heat this up a little bit? I ask their permission. Psychodrama is a work of invitation. 90% of the time they say yes. Internally. Every once in a while they'll say, no, I'm done. I did a psychodrama once at a conference with some volunteers, and we did a half hour on saying no. And we had somebody stand up and just scream no. No, I am done. And their work was to simply say, no, I don't want to do this. It was beautiful. Sometimes work is just showing up and sitting and being allowed. No is a complete sentence. It's that invitation. We talked about public and private work. I believe that's the gift of psychodrama. Here's some basic psychodrama terms. The stage is the group room, the environment. I've even worked in some situations where we go outside and we're in a field. That's the stage. You can do it anywhere. Protagonist is what the psychodrama is about, the person that it's about. Often I start with the person outside looking in, and sometimes I'll have them role switch and become part of it. The director is the therapist. Auxiliary ego is parts of themselves. Doubling is a technique. Anybody know what doubling is? Thank you. So let's do a little demonstration. I forgot your first name. You don't have to put your shoes on.
Okay.
It's,
That's better.
he's a pretty soxy person. Have a chair right here. Have a chair. Well, he's bringing all his props. Look at that.
It's survival.
Are you willing just to kind of reflect some things? That's the correct answer. So you're going to say, Mary, when you come over, I really would ask that you not drink. Go ahead and say that.
Mary, when you come over, I really would ask that you not.
So I hear you asking me not to drink.
And you're going to say is, I'll do whatever damn well I want. If I want to drink, I'm going to drink.
I'll do whatever damn well I want. If I want to drink, I'm going to drink.
You're going to say, okay, I just thought I'd ask, but that's fine.
Okay, I thought I just asked, that's fine.
And doubling is I'm in his internal voice. He's saying, you son of a bitch. You will not drink in my house, but you scare me and you intimidate me. And I really can't say it because I'm scared of what you're going to do and I'm going to lose you in my life. That's doubling. I'm his internal voice that he's not speaking. Do you guys follow that? Doubling is a cool thing that a therapist will do, and I just pick up on it, and it's really intuitive, and I'll just kind of walk behind and say, don't talk to me that way. And often the person then will say what the inner voice is saying and have the courage to try that. So I really want to set a boundary with you, and you will not drink in my presence. Try that.
I need to say a boundary with you. You will not drink in my presence.
Argue with him a little bit.
Then I'm not coming over.
That's your choice.
And the biggest boundary is you get up and leave. Yeah. So that's an example of doubling, which is a basic, and this is powerful for people that have never said no, is set a boundary. And I'm just speaking the internal voice. So de-roll, say I'm not the alcoholic, argumentative alcoholic.
I'm not the argumentative alcoholic anymore.
And you're going to say, I'm not the person setting boundaries with you.
I'm not saying the person setting boundaries.
So that makes it clean. You've got to shake off those roads. Okay?
Could you describe what auxiliary ego is?
Now, auxiliary ego is really aspects of that person. It may be, sometimes people are like two different people. And sometimes I'll have somebody say, this is your angry side, this is your submissive side, this is your crazy side, this is your rational side. And sometimes the auxiliary ego will play parts of themselves. So that's that. Sure. Role reversal, we already talked about that. It's switching can be really effective in the moment. Some of the coolest role reversals I do is when we have higher power in the room or God in the room, and God will be talking, and I said, no, you be God. It's really pretty powerful in the moment. They speak to them what their God would say to them. So.
Do you do the doubling with couples ever?
Yes, I do.
One of them or both?
Yeah. It becomes really fascinating when you do couples work with this type of stuff, which I have done, and it's a whole new dynamic. And particularly if we play the way they were as kids, their roles that they played as kids, and they identify those roles, and I say, you know, we're gathered together to marry these kids. They're bringing their dysfunctional roles to this relationship. It's pretty revealing. All right, cautions. Not everybody should do this kind of work, you think? So we're going to talk about this work, if you're not careful, if you don't know what you're doing, can hurt people. Do you believe that? Yes. And that's the biggest criticism is, oh, this is going to traumatize them. This is going to re-traumatize them. So some people will take the extremist view, so therefore I'm not going to do any of it. You can if you know what you're doing, if you have experience, if you've been mentored, and if you're careful, and if you pay attention. Okay? So you need to have experience and training. I was mentored for years and practiced with other people. You need to be really careful you don't re-traumatize the person. When we talk about trauma work, somebody asked about trauma work, I will do trauma work and talk about the feelings of the trauma. So we will say, this is your perpetrator. Talk to your perpetrator. But I will not recreate the actual event. I will not say, okay, you were raped, let's see what that looks like. There are some irresponsible psychodramatists years ago that would do things like that would mimic the actual event. And that people get hurt, in my opinion, with that. But you can recreate the feeling in the event. And sometimes all you do is say, there's your trauma, talk to it. And scoot the chair closer. He's coming for you again, what are you going to do? Things like that. But you don't get visual or graphic. That's irresponsible, in my opinion. Do your own work first. The need to not push one's own agenda. So that's part of cleansing yourself and doing your own work. So if you haven't done work, and up here in a minute ago when we did that sculpt, somebody had a lot of issues with the father or needed to talk to the angry father, but I, in my own personal life, hypothetically, would have unresolved issues with my mother, I may say, no, you really need to talk to your mom. I think that's where your work lies. And the protagonist, the person says, no, I want to talk to my dad. No, I really think you need to talk to your mom. That's my stuff that I'm projecting. So we got to make sure that, and I always check in myself. I said, what am I feeling in the moment? Is this my stuff, their stuff? All right?
I would think the doubling would be a more risky place,
Yes.
because you're trying to intuitively know what they may be thinking and feeling.
Absolutely. And
So,
go ahead.
so what do you do after that? You've made a good intuitive guess, let's say in doubling and saying what they were going to, you thought they would say. What comes next? You would ask
I
them?
say, is that right? Is that accurate? And sometimes I'm wrong.
And either way,
They'll tell you.
They need permission to say no.
Yeah.
That's
So,
not right.
so one thing I didn't go over is that before we do any psychodrama work, we need to create elements of safety. What do you need to do? What do you need to have in order to be safe physically and emotionally? And we often have the group list on a board what they need. And some of that is the ability to say no. Some of that is the ability to not be judged. Some of that is the ability to not be interrupted. Some of that is the ability to say, I don't want to go there. And we list elements of safety.
But that's what I was actually going to kind of ask, was do you ever have anybody like sort of outright refuse to participate?
Yeah. And one time I did a 45-minute psychodrama on no, and I also did an hour psychodrama on I don't know. I said, what do you want to work on? I don't know. Okay, who wants to be I don't know? We had somebody come on, well, what part of this don't you know? Well, I don't know. Well, somebody else be I don't know. And they were surrounded by I don't knows, and they became in touch with their ambiguity in their life. They don't know anything, and they can't make decisions, and that was their work. Everything is a potential therapeutic area that you can explore.
So can I ask one other
Yeah,
question?
sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm doing a co-therapy with a couple, and the other, my co-therapist is a man, and I frequently want to double the woman, even though I don't really do that, but having you explain it that way, I think I know what she wants to say, but she's not saying it.
Right.
Okay, could we both do that? Could I double her and he could double him?
Sure, you could do that. So doubling's a more evolved skill. I didn't start doing it until like several years ago, and I just started to get a sense of that. Now I trust my own sense of that, what I'm doing. But I always say, is that right? And they could say, that's not right. And I said, well, tell me what is right. And they become their own double in that moment, and that's empowering for people. So we already talked about impasses. Feedback guidelines is not advice or this is what you needed to do. It's about what you see, feel, hear, and how did you relate to it. Those are feedback guidelines that are powerful in psychodrama. What not to do, specific examples of approaches that don't work. So I don't see Kleenex in here. I go to treatment centers and I often find there's no Kleenex. This is just amazing to me. So if I had a Kleenex, the issues are in the tissues. Do you ever have somebody in group that somebody else starts to cry and somebody across the way is running at them with a box of Kleenex and sticks it in their face? Okay. I said a safety guideline is don't offer Kleenex to somebody unless they ask. I like people to get messy. I like people to have snot running down their face. I like people to sweat and get in the moment. And sometimes when somebody's throwing Kleenex or running over to them, it stops their emotions because they have this internal message, oh, that's bad, I better stop.
The other person's codependency.
Absolutely. Sometimes I then stick a fireman's hat on that other
We have
person.
to do that all the time in group. They're like, can I please get her tissues? I'm like, she has to ask for the tissue.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tissues are right in the
Yeah.
middle. She can get up and
Yeah,
get them.
she's capable, and maybe that's her work.
Yeah, but
That's
she has
her
to
work.
learn to ask for help.
So
or get
anyway, it's about other people's codependency. I need to stop. I mean to make them feel better, and it's often about them. So not hearing the client is really important not to do? I'm always checking in. Is that right? Is that where do you want to go? Who do you need to talk to? Does this make sense? I'm constantly asking those clarifying questions. I follow the client. I follow the patient. I believe that all of us intuitively know at some level what we need to work on. Now, there's a bunch of crap on top of it we need to get through, and defenses we need to get through, but I believe we all intuitively know what we need to do. Okay? No is a complete sentence. We need to challenge the client. Like, I've got an idea. Is it okay just to try that? And I'll set something up and say, oh, guess what? Your aborted child's here. Do you want to have a conversation? Because that person previously had mentioned an abortion. I wouldn't ambush them with that. But they mentioned, yeah, one of my biggest losses was my abortion. And then later on in the work, I said, guess what? Your aborted child's sitting right here. You want to have a conversation? There we go. Yeah. Loss. I talked with this gentleman about grief work. Sometimes I'll have somebody play a corpse. I'll have them lay down and put a black shroud over their face, and then have somebody talk to them as if they're buried. And then I'll resurrect that person, and that corpse will talk back to them. It's powerful stuff about grief work. I do not allow interruptions by the client or the audience during work, because that tends to put people back in their head. Sometimes we'll have impulsive people say, well, what about this? How come you didn't do this? I think they need to do this. Tell me more about that. And I just stop that, because we're in the one side of the brain that's emotional work, and if somebody wants to go to the cognitive side of the brain, it kills the work. Later on, we can process it. Later on, they can do some cognitive restructuring or CBT or DBT or whatever with that. But right now, we're doing experiential, emotive, psychodromic work. And we don't allow interruptions during it. It's sacred ground. It's holy ground at that point. Does that make sense? Thank you. So time-wise, we have about 25 minutes or so. I can go several directions now. Okay, I'll go over here. We could do another demonstration of a sculpt. Think about a hypothetical or real person you're working with that's struggling with addictions and or other diseases, and let's just look at that. In the here and now, when they're at their worst. Does anybody want to kind of think about somebody, or hypothetically?
I have one.
All right.
I have a client that has been in treatment for addiction for about 8 months, and he has stuck in an obsession with a neighbor that he knows had an emotional affair with his wife, and
That's all I need to know.
Okay.
That's all I need to know.
Okay.
Because we're going to look at that. So let's just come up with a hypothetical name for this person. John. So pick out somebody that can be John, or invite somebody to be John, or ask for a volunteer.
Volunteer.
I heard somebody say I'll volunteer.
Would you like to be John? Okay.
Thank you. So come on up. What's your real name? Todd. Let's give Todd a hand. So this is all he's doing is standing in. It's no big deal. So this is John at the worst of his disease and illness. How would you position him emotionally? What would he look like with his body? Representing him at his worst.
And can I picture a prop in his hand?
Sure.
Standing on his deck with a gun, trained on the neighbor's deck, and the neighbor's on the deck.
So do you want him just to use this? Or?
That's fine.
Or I didn't think. Okay.
Long range.
Long range gun.
He looks like he
So pick out the neighbor. Pick out the neighbor in here.
This fellow over here. Would you like to be the neighbor?
Okay. And where's the deck that he's on?
Just across the yard there. Just right over there.
Emotionally, what's the neighbor doing?
Probably grilling, not paying attention. Just doing this.
He isn't aware this guy's doing it.
No.
Right.
He's in his
So
garage.
now we get into symbolism and metaphors. What else is in his life? Who else is in his life right now?
So his wife and sons are just in the house, and he's in the garage.
So in his life, how close emotionally is his wife to him?
Not very
Let's
close.
pick out his wife. His wife.
Would you like to do that?
So how close or how far emotionally, not physically during this reenactment, but how close emotionally is she to him?
She's probably way over here.
Thank you for helping. You go way over there,
Back, with her back to it.
back turned. Cool. Who else is in his life?
One son for sure.
How old is
that's
that
in the
son?
home, teenage son.
Okay, pick out a teenage son.
Would you like to be the teenage son?
So we'll honor that. She said no, that's fine.
That's fine. Would you like to be the teenage son?
How close or how far emotionally is that son to,
Probably the son is over with the mom, but maybe a little further away. Maybe a
looking,
little
turned
clo-
away,
Closer.
a little closer, turned away, looking,
Turned away.
turned away. So, what else is in this guy's life? What else?
Well, addiction,
So, what kind of addiction?
opiate addiction.
So pick out opiates in here.
And benzodiazepine.
Yeah, pick out all that stuff.
Okay, all that stuff. How about this gentleman in the green shirt?
How close is the addiction, the drugs, to him emotionally?
Oh, right at his back.
Doing what?
Closest he can be.
Or is he hovering, kind of? Okay, yeah, like that.
Yeah.
You feel that energy? And what else is in his life? What other stuff versus?
There's work, and that's about it.
Okay, so pick out work, or have something to do
Would
with
you like to do work? Do work?
How close or far is
Work is just a little off to the side of him.
looking, pointing?
Probably looking. Other side.
Other side right here. Okay, watch the gun. Any depression, any anxiety, any other stuff going on with you? Any craziness, paranoia?
Oh, just complete rage and obsession that with the thoughts of what may have happened between the neighbor and the wife.
So kind of a paranoid anger.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so pick up paranoid anger in there. Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
How close is paranoid anger to this person?
Right beside the addiction.
Hovering also, or what?
Um,
Touching, grabbing, pulling?
I would, if I could put her just all in his hat, all over his head.
You okay with that?
Yeah, like that.
So here we are.
Yeah.
So what do you guys see when you look at this? What do you see from the outside? Lots of demons? What else do you see?
Torment.
What was that?
Torment.
Torment,
Isolation.
isolation,
Loneliness.
loneliness, anger. So if the protagonist was from the outside, I would ask the protagonist. But often what I do first is I ask the protagonist or star to ask, you, what do you feel? What comes up for you? Overwhelmed? And then I would say, is that right? Do you feel overwhelmed? And they usually would verify that. Then I would say to the client, the patient, or the protagonist, what do you want to do with this? I leave it up to them. I don't say, okay, now let's get to work. I say, what do you want to do with this? And they will say, I don't know what, but I need to do something. And we may simply say, talk to your neighbor, talk to anger, talk to addictions. Sometimes, and I'll briefly do this, is we just say, well, this must be really crazy. All of you guys just start making murmuring noise. Just go blah, 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 blah. You don't, you just listen. And freeze. Freeze, and I would say, what are you feeling?
I'm used for a second, and then disoriented.
Sometimes they say, this is normal. This is every day. You see the opportunities for work here? Let's just do a couple. What do you think we could do with this? What's the opportunities there? Yes?
Well, I would ask him if he is in danger of hurting himself or somebody else first off.
Absolutely.
I think it's a tragedy just waiting to happen.
Yeah. So we have some responsibility here to do that. If we just say, yeah, this is a SOB, what are you going to do? You know, we just say, tell me about your level of anger. Tell me about your level of thoughts. Do you have plans? We are responsible to do that. Okay. Anybody else had some ideas what you could do with this? We can do. Go ahead.
If you remold the scene, like what would you want it to look like? Or like what's the next,
Can I just make one
Yes.
suggestion? At this point, the addiction is not on them like that. Settle down, but close still. And the gun is not pointed at this point.
So you'd go to current day, because this was when he was at his worst.
At his worst, but he's still like more like got that.
So we
at the
could
neighbor.
go to what is your here now like, and how did you get there? What happened? What work did you do to relax this and to give him acknowledgement? It's like a motivational interviewing in psychodrama sense. Is look at what you've done. Good for you. So, other ideas?
Well, motivation, you're doing good motivational interviews, that would also be what you need to do more of.
Yeah, what do you need to do more of? And sometimes we say, this is how far you are, but you want to get here, what's in the way? And then we'll sculpt the obstacle. And sometimes it's fear.
Well, this also look at what's in the way and
Yeah. So we could have him turn, we could have him deal with his family, he could turn and talk to addiction, we could have addiction talk to him. Addiction might say, I've got you, I'm coming for you. You know, you got to be sure what. So you do lots of things here. So let's give him a hand.
Good, thank you.
So de-roll by doing this. If you played a role, just shake it off. Just shake it off. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Anything come up for anybody during that, or anybody want to share about that? Don't want to leave anything unfinished. So that's a little example. Sometimes my psychodramas are 10 minutes. Sometimes they're an hour and a half.
Can I ask, so you had her, the therapist, putting the people in the protagonist's life. Can you ask the client where they want to
That's what it would be. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's just that
Where would you put your mom?
right now I would have her channel be in the client, and I'd be saying, where would he go? Where would she
Okay.
go? Who do you pick? How's that different? Does that seem right?
I got you.
And it's constant like that.
I want to know
Because
how
he's
his
not
feelings
here.
would change if you put the gun down.
Yeah, and you could, and what you do is you take therapeutic risks. Put the gun down. Tell me how that feels.
What if you put him, well, I'm just getting excited, but put him in a role reversal with the neighbor?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Because it promotes empathy. Gosh, if he knew that, what would he be thinking? So you can literally do 20 to 50 different things. And you just check it out and say, what do you think? You want to heat this up? You want to try this? And sometimes,
I want to invite everybody to come and help you do that.
yeah.
Get in there.
Oh, you want us all to come to your office?
Set it up.
All right, my hourly rate is.
But how right? Look at that transitional statement. What you can start to do tomorrow. So some of this stuff is not rocket science. There are some basic techniques that anybody as a licensed therapist can try responsibly. Tomorrow you can do an empty chair. That's pretty much non-threatening. Say, guess what? Your drugs are sitting right here. Have a conversation. Wow. Guess what? And then sometimes I start bumping the chair against the person. They're knocking. What are you going to do? Okay. You can do that tomorrow. Family sculpt, just a frozen sculpt, is revealing. And a licensed therapist with some understanding and some sense can simply say, you know, all we're going to do is look at a picture. And you put it up and say, thank you. What'd you think of that? Okay? 10 minutes. Mirroring is a real basic technique. Just say, you know, this is what you're doing. I just thought you'd like to see a picture of that in a non-shaming way. And role reversal is a basic. Those are some real basic elementary techniques that you can be doing. This is what I talked about. So what's our time, Eric? It's like 11 minutes. Yeah. So I have something that could take about 11 minutes. Shall I do that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is our email addresses, by the way. We're Rosewood Centers for Eating Disorders. We're not supposed to self-promote. We're simply the best eating disorder facility in the world. So, does that work? I don't know. So if you're serious, if you have somebody that's very compromised with an eating disorder, we'll call our intake office and we can direct you either to ourselves or to somebody else. So let me do a closing thing. Psychodrama is an excellent way to teach people things too. So I'm going to teach the stages of change. I know clinically some of you know that from Bocheska's model. I change it a little bit. Everybody in this room has changed in something in their life. Everybody. I've changed. Even Deborah's changed. Everybody in this room has changed. And when they study changes, people say we go through stages of change. And I know you guys are clinically trained, but let's look at the stages of change using psychodrama as a teaching method. What's the first stage of change? And if we weren't going to use a clinical word, what your word would be used? Thank you. Let's use the layman language. Who wants to be denial in here? Thank you. And you know what denial stands for? Doesn't everybody know I'm lying? Think about it. All right, so this is denial. You're right here. With your body, what does denial look like? There it is. Thank you. It's like, I don't want to even look at the truth. I'm not the truth. I'm not going to face what you're telling me. Leave me alone. I'm going to avoid that. Denial can take various forms. Sometimes it's simple avoidance. Sometimes denial is anger. Get out of my face or I'll hurt you. Or sometimes it's like this, like you said. I can't hear it. It's, I'm fine. Feelings inside not expressed. I'm fine. Leave me alone. What's the second stage of change? Thank you. So who wants to do that? Okay, I'll come back to you. Yeah, come on up. We don't have to argue. We don't have to have it. Show me what thinking about it looks like. Perfect. It's like, maybe, just maybe, I might have a problem. I did get a DUI, but that was just kind of bad luck. I'll have to think about that. Third stage of change.
Planning.
Preparation. And I don't like preparation. So I throw that out and I come up with another word that starts with an S. Starts with an SU. Starts with an SUR. I have to spell it out for you. It starts with an SURR. Thank you. Who wants to be surrender in here? Come on up, man. And this is, I do this for patients and clients. This is their language and this is treatment language. This is recovery language. Show us with your body what surrender looks like. What does surrender look like? Total unconditional. I give up. You got me. I can't defend it anymore. I surrender. Take me away. You know. And the more important part of surrender is I'm willing to go to any lengths to change. Total unconditional. Sometimes I have people get down on their knees. Mm-hmm. Okay. Fourth stage of change. What do you think that is?
Action.
Action. Who wants to see action? I saw some action. Show us with your body what action looks like. Oh, yeah. Did you get that? Did you get that? So far we got no, maybe, yes, doing. And maybe for the first time this person is doing something different with this identified problem. They may be talking to somebody. They may be asking for help. They're going to an AA meeting. They're starting to follow a meal plan. They go to treatment. They move away from crazy neighbors. They're doing something different. Because at this point, it's all internal, isn't it? And finally, we get some external proof that there's change. And there's a fifth stage, which is maintenance. Who wants to be maintenance? Come on up.
That's what
Show us, and if you need help, let me know. But
I know, that's what I was trying to think of. I was thinking of cleaning
so,
for some reason.
so when you don't know, what do you do?
You pray.
Okay, so whatever. I go with her. Maintenance is you keep on doing it, and for her it means I'm praying that I'm going to keep on doing this. Whatever works. Sometimes I use a tool, you're tweaking it, like with a screwdriver, whatever it is. So, briefly, we got no, maybe, yes, doing, and keep on doing it, because if you don't, what happens? Relapse, which means falling back.
Can I take your picture?
Yeah, you can ask them if you want, but make sure everybody says okay.
That's fine.
They all said okay.
So she wants to know if she could take your pictures. Everybody okay?
Yes.
All right, so she said okay. Everybody said okay. So that's proof that you were here. So,
Now, can we use it for therapy?
so briefly, I just have a few minutes. True or false? Is this how change happens?
Yes.
Oh, not that.
Not
Does
that
it?
fast, but
So with addictions and
well, sometimes you go backwards.
with addictions and with eating disorders, particularly because there's food everywhere, there's bodies everywhere, this is how it happens. Sometimes it's 4 steps forward, 10 steps back. It's usually twist and turn. I get dizzy doing it. Okay. Another true false question, does everybody who surrenders step into action?
No.
Why not?
Fear.
Fear. Who said fear? Who wants to be fear in the room? I need somebody to be fear. Don't be scared. Sometimes it's not knowing, but secrets. So fear is like right here. You're right here. You're right here. Right here.
Am I being scary or am I being afraid?
So this is what happens. Sometimes it's no, maybe, yes, whoa. I really want to change. I know that if I stay here, I'm going to get sicker and possibly die. But this is scary. And if I go over here, I don't know what's going to happen. Because sometimes I think I am the disease. And I don't know who I am anymore. This is undiscovered territory. This is risky. And I feel like I'm going to be lost. So I'd rather stay here and get sicker than die, rather than take a risk and face my fear. This is treatment. Facing your fear. I really, really believe this is the work right here. Does that make sense? And what I do with this, with clients and patients, is if they play these roles, then I ask everybody, what stage are you in today? And it's like an inventory. And they can be in one stage in the morning and another stage in the afternoon. They can be in one stage and 10 minutes later they're in another stage. Okay, so I use this as a working example, as an inventory. And when I do family week, and I also say, do you think families go through these stages too? And they really, really relate to that because they are in their own denial. And then I say families have to face their own fear and take care of themselves. That's their action, is they need to go to their own therapist. They need to go to their own support group. They need to set boundaries. They need to take care of themselves because it is a family disease. Does that make sense? Any questions about this? Let's give them a hand. Okay, so shake off the role if you don't want to be that role. Any questions about this model before I kind of close up? So this is an example. From now on, when somebody says, what are the stages of change, you guys have this little picture in your head. Maybe different words, maybe not the clinical words, but you can use this with people. Be visual and teach some things. And to do inventories. Where are you at today? Show me with your body. Where are you at? All right, so I have a minute for questions. Give me questions, impressions, thoughts. Yes, ma'am.
No, it's just a comment. This was excellent. I remember we had to do this in college, maybe 20 years ago. This was big psychodrama. And I thought it was horrible and stupid and intrusive. And they would make people role play. And a lot of my clients, they would rather, that but this was very good, the sculpting, I never heard of that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, cognitive behavioral work, of course, is the current trendy thing, and I think CBT is really good for some kind of symptom relief. I'm not saying it's a terrible model or anything. But this is the other, for me, it's the other part of the conversation. I was trained in experiential work, going for feelings, and I think sometimes this is important. I think you're representing the other part of the conversation, which is the importance of experiential work, particularly about, I forget the Confucian phrase, but I like it a great deal. I just didn't strike to my head about that. It essentially really gets real when you're talking about your feelings.
What you do, you understand.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, very good. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
I was curious about maybe your experience with like collaborating with other expressive therapies, like art therapists
Yes,
or
yes.
music therapy.
Yes, we do that all the time where I work because it's part of the conversation. And sometimes people that can't verbally express can draw a picture. Sometimes people with music therapy can sing a song and adapt and relate to something that they can't do this work or talk about. So we do collaborate. We do equine therapy too with the horses. So we have holistic therapy. We use what works and we often collaborate. So good comment. Yes,
Have
ma'am.
you worked with any multiple personalities?
I'm really careful to use this with multiple personalities or DID because sometimes they get lost in the alters. That was my comment before I closed. Marino actually did sculpt with schizophrenics, and he sculpted their delusions. I wouldn't do that, but he was the father, and I think he just said, well, that's your world, let's look at it. And he was gutsy and did that, but I do not do that with people that have alters. One time I did that, we filled the room with 30 alters, and it was just basically a histrionic sensei, look at me. And it didn't work, but I don't. Other comments or questions? So thank you. You guys were just so respectful and actually.